Let's talk about rounding to the nearest 10 or 100. When you think about the word round, do you think about a circle or something that is circular shaped? Which number is round? Did you say 0? Rounded numbers end with 0. Let's look at this number line. When you first started rounding, you were just looking at numbers between 0 and 10. And you learned that the round numbers, do you see them? There's 0 on this end and 10 on the higher end. And you started by looking at how many hops it takes to get to the round number. So for 1, it would take 1 hop to get to 0, but it would take 9 hops to get all the way over to 10. So 1 is much closer to 0, so it would round to 0. The same for 2, the same for 3, and the same for 4. Then you looked at 9. For 9, it would be 9 hops to get all the way back to 0. That's a lot of hops, but only 1 hop to get to 10. So the number 9 would round up to 10. 8 is closer to 10, 7 is closer to 10, and 6 is closer to 10. That brings us to 5, which is right in the middle. 5 is halfway between 0 and 10, so it's 5 hops either way. But because we want to have a standard way of doing things, we just make a rule. The digit 5 always rounds up, so it's going to go up to 10. There's even a little saying to help you remember. We say 1 through 4, that's this part of the number line, down on the floor. 5 through 9, that's this part of the number line, move up the line. 1 through 4, down on the floor. 5 through 9, move up the line. Now we're going to be looking at rounding to the nearest 10. And to determine which 10s you need to look at, you have to look at the first digit of the number you're rounding. In this example, we're rounding the number 28. So when I decide which two 10s, or round numbers, 28 is between, I first start by bringing this 2 down and putting a 0 behind it. And then 2 plus 1 more would be 3, and put a 0 behind it. So 28 is going to be in between 20 and 30. So when we round, we have to go to a round number. So we're looking for 20 or 30. We look at where 28 is on the number line. When you do that, you can clearly see that it's only 2 hops away from 30. But it would be 8 hops away from 20. And if we think about our little rhyme, the 8 in the ones place tells us 5 through 9 move up the line. So 28 rounds to 30. It's closer to 30 than 20. What about 55? When I'm deciding which 10s it is in between, I'm going to take that first digit, 5, and put a 0 behind it. And then 1 more 10 than 50 is 60. So I'm choosing between 50 and 60. When I look at my number line, I would have 51, 52, 53, 54, 55. So it is right directly in the middle. But we learned a rule. When we're rounding any number that has a 5 in the ones place to the nearest 10, we're going to round up. 5 through 9 moves up the line. So 55 rounds to 60. For 93, I'm going to choose between the tens digit 9 plus a 0, and then 9 plus 1 is 10 plus a 0. So I'm choosing either 90 or 100. On my chart, on my number line, this is 90, so that's 91, 92, 93. I'm less than halfway, so I'm going to round down to 90. So halfway and more moves up, less than halfway at the 4 moves down. What if you have a number in the hundreds place and you have to round it to the nearest 10? Basically, you're just going to ignore the hundreds digit. Just look at this as thinking about 83. If I have to choose, 80 is the low number, 10 more than that is 90, and then I can just tack the 1 in the ones place on, because that part's not going to be affected. It will stay the same. The only part that will change is the digit after the digit we're rounding to. So if I have 183, and this is 180, and this is 190, this would be 181, 182, 183. So we're right here. And you can see it's less than halfway. Halfway would be 185. So it's going to round down to 180. Rounding 329 to the nearest 10. I ignore the hundreds place for right now. 29 either goes to 20, or 10 more than that would be 30. Then I can put that hundreds place back on. So I'm choosing between 320 and 330. So if I look on my number line, 320, 321, 322, 323, 324, 325, that's halfway. 326, 327, 328, 329. So we're right here. It's only one hop away from 330. So 329 rounds to 330. For 455, I'm just looking at the 55 part. On the low end, we have 50, plus 10 more is 60. Then we add on the hundreds place. So we're choosing between 450 and 460. When we put that on the number line, 55 is halfway between 50 and 60. So 455 would be halfway between 450 and 460. And the rule is, if it's halfway, it always rounds up. When we look at that ones place, 5 through 9 moves up the line. So this chart shows you any of the ones, well, our tens, our round numbers, are in orange or this bright yellow color. The light yellow shows you the numbers that round down. So anything with a 1, 2, 3, or 4 is going to go back to the number at the beginning of that row. Anything 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 is going to move up to the number on this end of the row. So if I said 53, it's going to round down to 50. If I said 77, it's going to round up to 80. If I said 13, it's going to round down to 10. If I said 87, it's going to round up to 90. If I said 65, it's going to round up to 70. So this is where the saying 1 through 4 down on the floor, 5 through 9 move up the line comes from. All right, now let's look at rounding to the nearest hundred. When we're rounding to the nearest 10, our answers only end with 1 0. So there will be a digit and a 0. When we're rounding to the nearest 100, we're going to have 2 zeros, unless it rounds to just 0 by itself. And the same rules are going to apply. If we look at a number line and we have 0 on one end and 100 on the other end, 50 is halfway between 0 and 100. So any number less than 50 is going to round down. So even up to the number 49. It's all going to round down on our number line. Then 50 all the way up to 99 is going to round up to the next 100. So halfway between 100 and 200 is 150. Halfway between 200 and 300 is 250. Halfway between 300 and 400 is 350. And halfway between 400 and 500 is 450. Let's say we want to round 242 to the nearest hundred. When I'm deciding which hundred to use, I take this digit and bring it down and put 2 zeros for the tens and ones place. And then that gives me the number on the lowest end. If I add 100 to that, that gives me the number on the high end to choose from. Then I go and mark where that number would be on the number line. Well, I know 242 is in between 240 and 250. And the 2 tells me it is closer to 240. Since 242 is less than 250, which is halfway, I'm going to round 242 down to 200. So really you're thinking about, is this part, the tens and ones, less than 50? If it's 50 or more, it rounds up. If it's less than 50, it's going to round down. 765 rounded to the nearest hundred. We take the hundreds place and put 2 zeros behind it to find the number on the low end. Then we add 100 to that to get the number on the high end. Those are our choices. Then we look and see in the digits that make up the tens and ones place, is this number more than 50? Is it more than halfway? On our number line, we know that 765 is halfway between 760 and 770. So this is definitely more than halfway. So we're going to round this number up to 800. 65 is more than 50, so it rounds up. What if we have digits in the thousands place? Can we still round that to the nearest hundred? Absolutely. The first thing we're going to do is just ignore that thousands place to start with. So if I'm rounding 1,537 to the nearest hundred, I'm going to look at this hundreds place and bring it down. Write a 0 for the tens and the ones. That's going to give me my low end. And then add 100 to that to get my high end. Then I can go back and add the thousands place. So on the low end, I'm going to round to 1,500. On the high end, I could round to 1,600. Now we go back and look at the tens and ones. 37. Since 37 would be about right here, and it's less than halfway, which is 50, this is going to round down to 1,500. So when you're rounding to the nearest hundred, you know how we had the 1 through 4 down on the floor? We're going to say 1 through 49 down on the floor, and 50 through 99 moves up the line. So when you're thinking about that, you're looking at the tens and ones. The tens place tells you whether to round up or down. I hope this has been helpful for helping you learn how to round to the nearest 10 or 100. See you next time.